This footage is part of the long winter archive, recovered after the collapse. It documents survival not as heroism, but as endurance. What you're about to hear is not a guide, not a lesson. It's a record of days that passed, of choices that mattered, and of winter that did not care who we were before. The first snow always looks harmless. Leaving became impossible. On the 13th day, you deal with your first illness since the storm. It starts as minor symptoms: slight fatigue, mild headache, a feeling of being vaguely unwell that you initially attribute to poor sleep or stress. But by afternoon, it's undeniable. You're sick with something, possibly a cold or flu, your body's immune system struggling to fight off infection in conditions of inadequate nutrition and constant stress. In Project Zomboid, illness is a serious threat, potentially fatal if not managed properly. The game tracks multiple types of sickness, from mild colds to severe infections, each with different symptoms, progression patterns, and treatment requirements. Without modern medicine, without antibiotics or antivirals, even minor illnesses can escalate into life-threatening conditions. You assess your symptoms methodically. No fever yet, which is good. Fever indicates more serious infection that's harder to fight. No respiratory distress, no chest pain, no signs of pneumonia or lung infection. What you have seems to be a head cold, uncomfortable and weakening, but not immediately dangerous if you rest and care for yourself properly. Treatment is straightforward in theory, difficult in practice. Rest, hydration, nutrition, warmth. Keep your body's resources focused on fighting the infection rather than other demands. Avoid strenuous activity that would further tax your system. Consume extra calories to fuel the immune response. Stay warm to prevent the illness from developing into something worse. But rest means not scavenging, not gathering firewood, not maintaining your usual routine. It means burning resources without replacing them, accepting temporary weakness in a world where weakness can be fatal. This is the dilemma of illness in survival scenarios. Proper recovery requires cessation of survival activities, but cessation of survival activities threatens long-term viability. You compromise, reducing activity but not eliminating it entirely. Essential tasks only. Feeding the stove, minimal food preparation, basic security checks. Everything else is postponed, your body given as much recovery time as circumstances permit. You sleep more, sometimes 14 or 15 hours per day, your body demanding rest it's been denied for months. The illness peaks on the 14th day, your head pounding, sinuses congested, energy levels at their lowest. You force yourself to eat even though you have little appetite, consume extra water even though getting up to refill bottles requires exhausting effort. The wood stove burns continuously, maintaining temperature in the mid-60s, warm enough for recovery, cool enough to conserve fuel. By the 15th day, you begin to feel improvement. The headache recedes. Congestion starts clearing. Energy returns in small increments. You're not fully recovered, but you're past the worst, your body winning its battle against whatever pathogen infected you. The experience leaves you weakened, your firewood reduced by 3 days of increased burning, your food stocks diminished by higher consumption during illness. But you survived. Another challenge met, another threat overcome. In the long catalog of things that could kill you in Knox County, illness ranks high, and you've demonstrated that even this can be endured with proper response and adequate resources. The nature of time, weeks becoming months. The 3rd week after the storm passes with deceptive speed, days blending together in routine familiarity. You've achieved a functional steady state, resources balanced against consumption, threats managed through caution and preparation. It's not comfortable, not easy, but it's sustainable, which in the apocalypse is all you can reasonably ask. On the 20th day, you realize with something approaching shock that you've survived half a year. 181 days since the Knox event began in early July. Half a year of constant vigilance, daily survival challenges, endless adaptation to deteriorating conditions. It's simultaneously an eternity and an instant, time having lost its normal meaning in this new world. You mark the milestone with a small celebration, allowing yourself a luxury meal. Canned ham heated on the stove, green beans, canned peaches, and crackers. It's not a feast by pre-K Knox standards, barely more than a normal meal now, but the intent matters. Acknowledging achievement, celebrating survival, maintaining your own humanity through small rituals of normalcy. As you eat, you think about time and its strange quality in isolation. Before the Knox event, time was structured by external factors: work schedules, social commitments, television programs, news cycles, the rhythm of modern life. Days had distinct identities. Monday felt different from Saturday, morning from evening, work time from leisure. Now, stripped of those external structures, time becomes more fluid and less defined. Days are distinguished mainly by weather and your own activities, not by any inherent quality. Monday means nothing in a world without employment. Weekend is a concept without meaning, when every day is survival. This temporal disorientation affects you in subtle ways. Sometimes you lose track of what day of the week it is, having to count backward from your last certain knowledge to figure out whether today is Tuesday or Thursday. Occasionally you forget the date entirely, knowing only that it's winter, it's cold, you've been surviving for many months. The calendar continues its mathematical progression, but its significance has eroded. Project Zomboid tracks time precisely, displaying date and hour, keeping meticulous record of survival duration. But even within the game, experienced players report losing track of time, becoming absorbed in the day-to-day struggle, and forgetting to monitor the larger progression. Time becomes experiential rather than chronological, measured in achievements and failures rather than hours and days. You've developed your own temporal markers to maintain some sense of progression. You keep a journal, nothing elaborate, just brief daily entries noting weather, activities, significant events. Reading back through these entries provides perspective, reminds you how far you've come, documents your adaptation and growth as a survivor. The journal also serves psychological purposes. Writing forces you to process experiences, to translate raw sensation and emotion into words that make sense. It provides an outlet for thoughts and feelings that have no other expression in your solitary existence, and it creates a record, a testimonial that you existed, that your struggles meant something, even if you ultimately fail and join the endless ranks of the infected. On the 23rd day, you experience your first real warm spell since the storm. The temperature rises to 42 degrees Fahrenheit, positively balmy compared to recent weeks. Snow begins melting, creating streams of water running through the streets, exposing pavement in patches for the first time in over 2 weeks. The change is dramatic and welcome, reducing your fuel consumption significantly and improving travel conditions. You take advantage of the warmth to conduct extended scavenging, ranging farther from your base than you have since before the storm. 4 blocks in multiple directions, checking buildings you've previously marked as potential targets but were too distant or dangerous to risk visiting. The improved conditions make these expeditions feasible, and you gather significant supplies, more canned food, additional clothing, including a second winter jacket for backup, tools, including a handsaw that will be invaluable for processing firewood, medical supplies, including a bottle of antibiotics that could save your life if serious infection develops. These successful scavenging runs improve your overall situation substantially. You now have 38 days of food, if carefully rationed, Your firewood stockpile, replenished during the warm spell, stands at 73 pieces between your house and the garage cache. Medical supplies have expanded to include antibiotics, painkillers, bandages, disinfectant, and even a partial bottle of antidepressants you found in a bathroom cabinet and decided to keep despite your general avoidance of pharmaceuticals. The warm spell lasts 3 days before temperatures drop again, winter reasserting its grip. But those 3 days provided crucial opportunities that you exploited effectively, turning favorable conditions into concrete survival advantages. The mental game, psychology of extended survival. As the 4th week begins, you find yourself increasingly preoccupied with psychological rather than physical survival. Your basic needs are met: shelter, food, water, warmth, security. The immediate crisis of the storm is long past. Your situation is stable, possibly as stable as apocalypse survival can be. But this stability brings its own challenges: the mental and emotional difficulties of extended isolation and constant stress. Depression becomes a more noticeable presence in your daily experience. Not the acute, overwhelming depression that prevents function, but a chronic low-level sadness that colors everything. A sense of futility, of pointlessness, of going through survival motions without any larger purpose or goal. You're surviving, but surviving for what? To survive another day, then another, in endless progression with no destination or conclusion except eventual death? These thoughts are dangerous, you recognize. They undermine the will to continue, erode the mental resilience that's kept you alive this long. But recognizing them doesn't eliminate them, doesn't make them less present or powerful. You combat this mental state through various strategies, some more effective than others. Physical activity helps. Exercise generating endorphins that temporarily lift mood. Maintaining routines provides structure and purpose, even if that purpose is ultimately arbitrary. Setting and achieving small goals creates a sense of progress and accomplishment. Reading offers escape from your circumstances, temporary immersion in other worlds and other people's stories. But these strategies are palliative, treating symptoms without addressing root causes. The fundamental problem is isolation combined with purposelessness. Humans are social creatures, evolved for community, for connection, for collective endeavor toward shared goals. You have none of these things, haven't had them for months, and the absence grinds against your psychological well-being like sand in a wound. In Project Zomboid, the game's mechanics acknowledge this through the Moodle system. Prolonged isolation leads to unhappiness, which affects character performance and decision-making. The game offers various remedies: reading books, eating favorite foods, taking antidepressants, but these are band-aids on a fundamental problem that the game, like real life, can't truly solve. You find yourself talking more frequently to imaginary conversational partners, narrating your activities aloud as if someone is listening. Okay, so we need to check the firewood situation. Let's count what we have. The we is purely fictional, but it provides psychological comfort. Sometimes you imagine detailed scenarios, what you would say if you encountered another survivor, how that conversation would unfold, what questions you'd ask, and what answers you'd give. These fantasies become elaborate, spanning hours, creating entire narratives of human connection that exist only in your mind. You know this is probably unhealthy, probably indicates deteriorating mental state, but you can't quite bring yourself to stop. The fantasies feel too good, too necessary, too much like a pressure valve releasing psychological steam that would otherwise explode destructively. On the 27th day, you make a decision that surprises you. You're going to attempt to find the survivor you spotted 16 days ago. The desire for human contact has become strong enough to outweigh the risks, At least in your current mental state, you need to know if connection is possible, if cooperation might work, if you can sustain social existence alongside survival challenges. The preparation is extensive. You gather supplies for potential trade or offering, extra food, spare clothing, tools you have duplicates of. You plan your approach carefully, identifying the general area where you saw the other survivor and mapping potential routes and safe zones. You rehearse what you'll say, how you'll signal non-hostile intent, how you'll react if they respond with aggression. The expedition begins on the 28th day, early morning, when visibility is good and zombies are dispersed. You move through familiar streets toward the area where you spotted the other survivor, watching for any signs of habitation, smoke from fires, modified buildings, patterns in zombie distribution that might indicate someone actively managing their surroundings. Hours pass in careful searching. You find nothing definitive, no clear evidence of another survivor's presence. No smoke rises from any building. No structures show recent modification. The zombies shamble randomly, without patterns that suggest someone is leading them away from specific areas. Either the survivor has moved on, or they were never based in this area at all. As afternoon begins to fade toward evening, you're preparing to give up and return home when you see it. A barricaded window that wasn't barricaded when you scavenged this area weeks ago. Fresh boards, recently installed based on the clean wood that hasn't weathered like the surrounding structure. Someone has been here, is possibly still here, has fortified this building within the past few days. Your heart rate increases, mouth suddenly dry despite the cold. This is it. Potential contact, the possibility you've been both hoping for and dreading. You approach the building carefully, watching for any sign of threat or welcome, hand near your shotgun but not quite touching it, trying to signal caution without aggression. At the front door, you pause and consider how to announce yourself. Shouting seems too loud, too likely to draw zombies. Knocking might startle whoever's inside, trigger defensive response. You settle on a compromise, calling out in a normal speaking voice, loud enough to be heard inside, but not so loud it echoes through the neighborhood. Hello? Is someone inside? I'm not infected, not a threat. Just another survivor looking for contact. Silence stretches for long seconds. Then, from inside, a voice, cautious and tense. How do I know you're really alive? Could be a trap. Relief and anxiety flood through you in equal measure. Actual human voice, actual person, actual possibility of connection. But also wariness, suspicion, the recognition that trust has become a luxury in this world. I can prove I'm alive. Ask me something only a living person would know, or I can wait here while you observe me through a window, see that I move and think like a survivor, not infected. Another pause. Then, what day is it? The question catches you off guard. Seems too simple, but you answer, Friday, December 28th, 24. What was the last thing on TV before broadcasts stopped? You think back? Memory of those final broadcasts surprisingly clear. Emergency broadcast loop, instructions to shelter in place, military declaring exclusion zones and shoot-to-kill orders for evacuation attempts. More silence, then the sound of movement inside. Barricades being shifted, furniture dragged aside. The door opens slightly, revealing a woman perhaps in her 40s, holding a rifle aimed at your chest, eyes evaluating you with practiced suspicion. You alone? She asks, completely. Have been for months. Same. She lowers the rifle slightly but doesn't put it away. I'm Sarah. This is my place. What do you want? What do you want? The question seems simultaneously obvious and impossible to answer. Company? Cooperation? Reassurance? that you're not the last sane person in Kentucky? All of these and more needs too complex to articulate in this moment of tentative first contact. Just to know I'm not alone, to talk to someone who understands what this is like, maybe to trade information, resources, help each other survive. Sarah studies you for long moments, and you can see the same internal debate you experienced playing out behind her eyes, the desperate desire for connection battling against hard-learned caution. But we do this slow. Talk here, at the door. For now, you don't come in, I don't come out. We establish trust before any of that. Understood? Absolutely understood. And so begins a conversation. Stilted and awkward at first, two people who have forgotten how to interact with other humans, gradually remembering the rhythms of dialogue. You trade basic information. How long you've each survived, where you're based, what resources you have access to. You share observations about zombie behavior. Compare notes on survival strategies. Discuss the storm and how you each endured it. The conversation lasts perhaps 40 minutes before Sarah says she needs to tend to her own shelter's fire before it dies. You exchange locations, agree to meet again in 2 days at the same spot, continue building whatever relationship might be possible. As you walk away, heading back toward your own base in the gathering darkness, you feel something you haven't experienced in months. Hope. Not naive hope. Not the belief that everything will be okay or that this single connection solves all your problems, but a small, fragile hope that survival might include more than just continued existence, that humanity might persist not just biologically, but socially, in connection and cooperation and shared experience. Project Zomboid allows for cooperative multiplayer, players working together to survive, combining resources and capabilities. In single-player, NPC survivors can provide similar dynamics, though with less reliability and more risk. The fundamental recognition underlying these mechanics is that humans are stronger together, that cooperation enables survival scenarios that would be impossible alone. As you arrive at your house and secure yourself inside for the night, tending your fire and preparing a simple dinner, you think about the conversation with Sarah, replaying it mentally, analyzing what was said and not said, planning what you'll discuss in 2 days when you meet again. The loneliness hasn't disappeared. The depression hasn't vanished. The fundamental challenges of survival remain unchanged. But something has shifted. Some possibility has opened. And that possibility makes the next day seem less futile, less empty, less endlessly the same. You sleep better that night than you have in weeks and dream of conversations yet to come. Cooperation and its complexities. The 30th day brings your scheduled second meeting with Sarah, and you approach it with carefully managed expectations. The first contact went well, but sustainable cooperation requires more than a single positive interaction. It requires aligned interests, compatible personalities, mutual trust built over time through demonstrated reliability. You arrive at the meeting location with a small offering. Canned coffee you scavenged weeks ago and have been hoarding. In the pre-Knox world, coffee was ubiquitous, barely valued. Now, it's a luxury item, comfort in a can, something Sarah might appreciate as a gesture of good faith. She's already there when you arrive, visible through a window, weapon ready but not aimed. The door opens at your approach, and there's slightly less tension than before. Slightly more warmth in the greeting. "You came back," she says, as if there was doubt. Of course, isolation is exhausting. I need this as much as you do. You offer the coffee, and her eyes widen slightly. Oh God, I haven't had coffee in 2 months. My stash ran out after the storm. Same boat. This is my last can. Figured sharing it beats hoarding it alone. This small exchange, the giving and receiving of a gift, establishes a foundation. It's not monumental, but it's meaningful. A demonstration that you're willing to sacrifice personal resources for shared benefit. Sarah invites you inside for the first time. A massive leap in trust, and you accept with appropriate caution and respect. Her safe house is similar to yours in many ways. Barricaded windows, stockpiles of supplies, a wood-burning stove for heat, weapons kept close at hand. But there are differences too, personal touches that speak to who Sarah was before the Knox event. Books organized carefully by genre on a shelf, photographs in frames, faces you don't recognize but that clearly matter to her. A guitar leaning in a corner, strings probably long since detuned but kept nonetheless. You share the coffee heated on her stove, and the conversation that develops is richer than the first meeting, moving beyond basic survival information into personal territory. Sarah was a teacher before the Knox event, 8th grade English in Muldrows Middle School. She lost her husband and son in the initial outbreak, watched them turn, had to make the impossible choice that all survivors have faced in some form. She survived not through special skills or preparation, but through luck and stubborn refusal to surrender. You share your own story, the before and after, the slow accommodation to a world that bears no resemblance to the one you expected to inhabit. The losses, the close calls, the small victories that have kept you alive and functioning. Sarah listens with the intense attention of someone starved for human narrative, and you recognize the same hunger in yourself. The conversation eventually turns to practical cooperation. What could a partnership look like? What would each of you contribute? And what would each expect in return? Sarah is stronger in medical knowledge, having learned first aid and basic nursing to care for her son's chronic condition before the Knox event. She can treat injuries and illnesses more effectively than you can, potentially saving your life if serious problems develop. You have superior scavenging experience, having explored more of Muldrow and developed efficient routes through zombie-dense areas. You also have the garage cache system established, a resource distribution network that could benefit both of you. The proposal that emerges is cautious cooperation rather than full integration. You'll maintain separate bases, separate stockpiles, separate security, but you'll coordinate scavenging operations, share information about zombie movements and resource locations, provide backup for dangerous expeditions, and offer mutual aid in emergencies. It's a partnership of convenience and survival pragmatism rather than deep friendship, at least initially. Over the following days, you test this arrangement with small collaborative efforts. A joint scavenging run to a pharmacy 2 miles away, too dangerous for one person alone, but manageable for two working together. One person watches for zombies while the other searches, then roles reverse. The mission succeeds, yielding medical supplies that you divide evenly according to prior agreement. Another collaboration. Firewood gathering from a distant location neither of you could safely reach alone. 2 people can carry twice as much wood and can defend each other if zombie encounters occur. The expedition takes most of a day, but results in both your stockpiles increasing significantly, fuel security extended by weeks for both of you. These successes build trust incrementally. You learn to read each other's signals during tense moments, develop wordless communication that allows coordination without drawing zombie attention. You begin to genuinely rely on each other not just as abstract concepts but as concrete presences whose capabilities and reliability you've verified through shared experience. But cooperation also introduces new complexities and tensions. On the 37th day, a disagreement arises about resource distribution. You found a valuable cache of ammunition during a solo scavenging run. Sarah argues that all major finds should be shared equally, regardless of who discovers them. You counter that individual effort deserves individual reward and that you're willing to share, but not on a completely equal basis. The argument reveals underlying tensions about fairness, contribution, and entitlement in survival scenarios. In the pre-Knox world, these issues were managed through markets, laws, social norms. Now, with no external structures to arbitrate disputes, you must negotiate everything from first principles, what's fair when resources are scarce, and literally life-preserving. How do you balance individual contribution against collective benefit? You reach an uneasy compromise. Major finds are shared with a 60-40 split, favoring whoever made the discovery, incentivizing continued individual initiative while still providing collective benefit. It's not perfect, doesn't satisfy either of you completely, but it's workable, a functional solution to a problem that has no objectively correct answer. Project Zomboid's multiplayer mode deals with these issues through various mechanisms, from honor systems to coded loot distribution systems to designated leadership structures. But all of these approaches recognize the fundamental challenge. Cooperation requires balancing individual and collective interests in ways that maintain both motivation and cohesion. The partnership with Sarah continues developing through the rest of December and into early January. By the 40th day of acquaintance, you've established genuine friendship alongside practical cooperation. You know each other's stories, fears, hopes. You've shared meals, conversations, moments of dark humor about the absurdity of your situation. You've saved each other's lives in zombie encounters that could have gone fatally wrong for a solo survivor. This friendship provides psychological benefits that are difficult to quantify but profoundly real. The depression that plagued you during extended isolation has lessened significantly. Days have new meaning beyond mere survival, enriched by the knowledge that someone else understands and shares your experience. The imaginary conversations you used to conduct with fictional companions have been replaced by actual dialogue with a real person. But Sarah's presence also highlights what's been lost. She tells you about her son, about teaching him to read, about his laughter and curiosity, and the future he'll never have. You share memories of people you knew, places that no longer exist in any meaningful sense, normalcy that seems almost mythical in retrospect. These conversations are painful, forcing engagement with grief that you'd been suppressing through sheer survival focus. Project Zomboid doesn't explicitly model grief, but experienced players report feeling genuine sadness for lost characters, for worlds built and then destroyed through mistake or bad luck. The game's permadeath system means that every character's story ends eventually, usually violently. And while you can start over, you can't reclaim what was lost. This mirrors the reality of the Knox event, where every survivor carries the permanent loss of the world that was. The rhythm of survival, deep winter routines. As January progresses and the storm becomes a receding memory, you and Sarah settle into established patterns that structure your days and weeks. Monday and Thursday are collaborative scavenging days, targeting locations too dangerous or distant for solo operations. Tuesday and Friday, you maintain your individual bases, repairing damage, organizing supplies, conducting minor solo scavenging in familiar nearby areas. Wednesday is a rest day, acknowledging that even survival requires periodic recovery from continuous effort. Saturday is dedicated to firewood and water gathering, ensuring fundamental resources remain adequate. Sunday is flexible, used for whatever urgent needs have emerged during the week. This structure provides the psychological benefits of routine while maintaining flexibility for unexpected challenges. It also ensures regular contact with Sarah, the twice-weekly meetings preventing the isolation that breeds depression while not being so frequent that you lose independence or begin to annoy each other through excessive proximity. The rhythm becomes comfortable, even reassuring in its predictability. You know what each day holds, can plan appropriately. Don't waste mental energy constantly deciding what to do next. This conservation of decision-making resources matters more than you initially realized. Every choice, even small ones, consumes mental energy, and in extended survival scenarios, that energy is as important as physical calories. On day 198, February's arrival brings subtle signs of coming spring. The sun rises slightly earlier, sets slightly later. Temperatures during afternoon hours occasionally climb above freezing, creating thaw periods that make travel easier. The snow begins a slow recession, losing depth incrementally, revealing landscapes buried since December. These changes are psychologically significant beyond their practical impacts. They represent time's passage, winter's finite nature, the promise that current hardships won't last forever. In Projec Zomboid, seasonal transitions are clearly marked, the game informing you when summer becomes fall, fall becomes winter, winter becomes spring. Players often report these transitions as emotionally significant milestones, markers of survival duration and progress toward something. Not salvation or rescue, the game offers no hope of those, but toward continued existence in a slightly less hostile season. You and Sarah discuss spring's approach during a Wednesday rest day spent together. What will warmer weather enable? Gardens could be planted, providing fresh vegetables to supplement canned foods and improve nutrition significantly. Longer days mean more time for outdoor activities and scavenging. Reduced heating needs will extend firewood stockpiles, making fuel gathering less urgent and consuming. But spring also brings challenges. Zombies that have been semi-dormant during winter, moving slowly in the cold, will become more active in warmth. The infected don't experience fatigue or resource depletion, don't need to rest or recover, and warmer weather may increase their threat level. Additionally, melting snow will reveal the full extent of winter's damage to structures, potentially exposing you to new dangers as compromised buildings collapse or barricades fail. Planning for these future challenges provides purpose and direction, something to work toward beyond mere day-to-day survival. You and Sarah begin collecting seeds from scavenged locations, gathering gardening tools, identifying potential planting sites that offer good sun exposure, and defensible perimeters. These preparations feel optimistic in a way that's both refreshing and frightening. Optimism implies expectation of future benefit, and expectation creates vulnerability to disappointment. On day 205, you encounter a zombie horde larger than any you've seen since the initial Knox event outbreak. Perhaps 50 infected individuals, moving together in a loose cluster, shambling through the streets in a direction that will bring them directly past Sarah's base. This presents an immediate crisis requiring urgent response. The two of you convene quickly, assessing options. Fighting 50 zombies is suicidal even with 2 people. Running is impractical. Sarah's base contains too many critical supplies to abandon. The only viable option is to hide and hope the horde passes without detecting either of you. But if they do detect you, if they begin to cluster around Sarah's building, the situation could become desperate very quickly. You implement an emergency protocol you've discussed but never practiced. Sarah secures herself in her upper floor with all noise minimized and light sources extinguished. You position yourself in a nearby building with clear sightline to her base and the approaching horde, ready to create distraction if the zombies begin focusing on her location. The plan is risky for you, potentially drawing the entire horde toward your position, but it's the best option available in limited time. The horde arrives, and from your hiding position, You watch them shamble past Sarah's building. They don't seem to notice it, don't cluster or investigate, just continue their migration toward whatever distant stimulus originally drew them into coordinated movement. Minutes stretch like hours as zombie. After zombie passes within feet of Sarah's barricaded door. You count them mentally. 38, 39, 40. The stream seems endless, a nightmare made manifest. Finally, the last few stragglers pass, and the street falls quiet again. You wait additional minutes to ensure no trailing zombies are following, then carefully make your way to Sarah's base to confirm she's safe. She emerges shaken but unharmed, the close call having reminded both of you how precarious survival remains despite your preparations and cooperation. This incident prompts serious discussion about escape planning and emergency protocols. If a horde had broken into Sarah's base, what would she do? Where would she flee? What supplies would she take? What rally point would she head toward where you could reunite? These questions have obvious answers in theory, but need concrete planning and preparation to be executable under stress. You spend the following days establishing emergency caches at multiple locations throughout Muldraugh. Hidden stockpiles containing basic survival supplies that could sustain either of you for several days if separated from your main bases. Food, water, first aid, weapons, warm clothing, fire-starting materials. These caches are insurance against worst-case scenarios, distributed redundancy that increases overall system resilience. The work is exhausting and consumes significant resources, but it provides genuine security improvements. Knowing that catastrophic base loss wouldn't mean immediate death, that you have fallback options scattered throughout the area, reduces anxiety and allows for riskier operations that might otherwise be too dangerous to attempt. The weight of memory. Processing the past on day 213, Sarah asks you a question that catches you completely off guard. Do you think they would be proud of us? The people we were before? You're sitting in her safe house, sharing a meal of canned stew and crackers, and the question hangs in the air like smoke. It's not something you've consciously considered, too focused on forward survival to spend much time evaluating yourself against past standards. I don't know, you answer honestly. I've done things I never imagined doing. Killed people, even if they were infected. Stolen from the dead. Hoarded resources while others somewhere might be starving. The old me would probably be horrified. Sarah nods slowly. I think about this a lot. Before, I taught kids about morality, about being good people, about choosing right over easy. Now I've abandoned all of that. I don't share with strangers because it might get me killed. I've lied to protect my supplies. I've left people to die rather than risk helping them. The conversation continues into difficult territory, both of you grappling with the moral compromises survival has required. In the pre-Knox world, you operated within established ethical frameworks, social structures that made right and wrong relatively clear. Help people in need. Don't take what isn't yours. Value human life. Cooperate for collective benefit. But the apocalypse has shattered those frameworks, creating situations where traditional morality becomes actively dangerous. Help a stranger, and they might kill you for your supplies. Share resources generously, and you might starve when your stockpiles run out. Prioritize other people's lives equally with your own, and you probably won't survive long enough to help anyone. Project Zomboid forces these ethical calculations constantly. Every encounter with another person, NPC or player, requires decisions about cooperation versus competition, trust versus suspicion, altruism versus self-interest. The game doesn't judge these choices morally, doesn't reward kindness or punish selfishness except through practical consequences. It simply presents scenarios and lets you decide, then shows you the results. You share with Sarah something you've never articulated before. The guilt you feel about people you didn't help early in the Knox event. A neighbor trapped in their house by zombies, screaming for assistance you could have provided but didn't because it was too dangerous. A child you saw once, alone and terrified, who you avoided because taking responsibility for another person seemed impossible. These decisions were rational, probably saved your life, but they haunt you nonetheless. Sarah has similar memories, similar guilt. An elderly woman she could have sheltered but turned away. An injured man she passed on the street, unable to spare medicine or time for someone unlikely to survive anyway. These aren't confessions seeking absolution. You both understand that no absolution is available or meaningful. They're simply acknowledgement, bearing witness to each other's compromises and pain. The conversation is emotionally exhausting, but strangely cathartic. For months you've carried these memories alone, unable to process them with anyone who would understand the context and constraints. Sarah's presence provides that understanding. The recognition that survival sometimes requires choices that scar your conscience even as they preserve your life. You talk late into the night, the wood stove burning low, shadows dancing on the walls, two survivors sharing the weight of memory in a world that has forgotten how to judge. The promise of spring. February's end day 226 brings unmistakable evidence that winter is finally releasing its grip on Kentucky. The temperature reaches 58 degrees Fahrenheit in afternoon sun, genuinely warm for the first time in 3 months. Snow has melted completely from south-facing surfaces, revealing grass that's brown and dead, but no longer frozen. Birds appear, sparrows and robins that somehow survived the winter. Their presence, a reminder that life persists in forms beyond humans. And zombies. You and Sarah stand outside together, faces turned toward the sun, absorbing warmth that feels almost decadent after months of constant cold. Neither of you speaks for long minutes, just experiencing the moment, the simple pleasure of warmth on skin, of seeing the world in colors beyond white and gray. We made it, Sarah says finally. Through the storm, through winter, through everything. We did, you agree. And there's genuine pride in that acknowledgement, recognition of achievement that seemed impossible during the storm's worst moments. Spring's arrival doesn't eliminate danger or struggle, doesn't solve the fundamental challenges of surviving in a zombie-filled world, but it changes the equation somewhat, shifts conditions from actively hostile toward merely difficult. Your firewood demands will drop dramatically, freeing time and energy for other pursuits. Travel will become easier without snow impediment, allowing access to distant resources. Growing food becomes possible, potentially reducing long-term dependence on scavenged canned goods. You and Sarah have survived 226 days through summer heat and fall decline and winter's brutal assault. You've adapted, learned, grown in capability and resilience. You've built partnership from isolated desperation, created community from fragments in a shattered world. You've maintained humanity and sanity in circumstances designed to destroy both. Project Zomboid measures success purely in survival duration, the game's statistics tracking how many days you've persisted before inevitable death. But real success, the kind that matters psychologically and emotionally, can't be reduced to numbers. It's measured in moments of connection, in challenges overcome, in the stubborn refusal to surrender to despair. As the sun sets on this warm February day, you return to your individual bases with plans to meet tomorrow and begin serious garden planning. The future stretches ahead, uncertain and dangerous, but no longer quite as hopeless as it seemed during the storm's darkest hours. You tend your stove one more time, feeding it the last piece of wood from today's burn, and settle into your sleeping bag with something approaching contentment. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new struggles, the endless continuation of survival's demands. But tonight, in this moment, you're warm and fed and safe and not alone. And in the apocalypse, that's more than enough. That's everything. So if you've made it this far into this long, cold, and quiet journey through Project Zomboid's unforgiving winter, I want to thank you. Thank you for spending this time in the snow-covered streets of Muldraugh, in the isolation of a survivor's safe house, in the gradual rhythm of apocalypse existence. Survival stories aren't always about dramatic heroics or impossible victories. Sometimes they're about endurance, about continuing when continuation seems pointless, about finding meaning and connection in a world designed to strip both away. The Long Winter Archive exists to explore these quieter stories, the ones that unfold slowly, that accumulate rather than explode, that find drama in daily persistence rather than spectacular moments. We'll be back with more content soon, more explorations of games, history, science, and the human experience, filtered through different lenses. Until then, stay warm, stay safe, and remember that every day survived is a victory worth celebrating, whether in gaming or in life. If you enjoyed this journey, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. It helps us continue creating this kind of content, these long-form explorations that hopefully provide something different from the usual YouTube experience. Thanks for listening. Sleep well. And I'll see you in the next one. Hashtag, this snowstorm trapped everyone inside. Project Zomboid. Calm introduction. Find a comfortable position and let yourself settle. Whatever tensions you're carrying from the day, whatever thoughts are racing through your mind, just acknowledge them for a moment and then let them drift away like smoke on a winter breeze. We're about to step into a different world together, a quieter world, where the only sounds that matter are the whisper of falling snow and the crackle of a wood fire keeping the darkness at bay. Tonight's journey takes us deep into the frozen heart of Knox County, Kentucky, to a world transformed by catastrophe and blanketed in white. Here, in the aftermath of the Knox event, a lone survivor faces their greatest challenge yet, a blizzard that traps them inside, cuts them off from everything, and tests not just their will to live, but their ability to maintain hope when hope seems like the most dangerous luxury of all. This isn't just a story about a game called Project Zomboid. It's an exploration of isolation, of what it means to persist when persistence seems pointless, of finding warmth in the coldest moments, both literal and metaphorical. So, take a deep breath. Feel yourself sinking deeper into wherever you're resting. Let the familiar world fade and allow yourself to be transported to a small, fortified house where a single candle flickers against the encroaching night, where survival is measured in the pieces of firewood remaining, and where every heartbeat is a quiet victory against impossible odds. Close your eyes if you'd like, or keep them open and let them grow heavy as we move forward together. Either way, and our story begins now, on a December morning, when the first snowflakes started to fall, innocent and beautiful, with no hint of the storm that was coming. The first flakes, a deceptive beginning. The morning of December 8th arrives with a peculiar stillness that veteran survivors of the Knox event have learned to recognize. It's the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums, making you acutely aware of every small sound inside your safe house. The creak of floorboards beneath your feet, the soft ticking of a wind-up clock you managed to salvage from an abandoned home 3 weeks ago. Your own breathing steady and measured, a reminder that you're still among the living in a world dominated by the dead. You wake before dawn, as you always do now. Sleep has become a luxury measured in nervous 3-hour increments, always with one ear, listening for the telltale shuffle of undead feet or the groan of rotting vocal cords announcing unwanted visitors. But this morning feels different. The quality of light filtering through the gaps in your boarded windows has changed. Instead of the weak, gray illumination of a winter dawn, there's a strange brightness, almost reflective, that seems to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. Rising from your sleeping bag, you approach the window and carefully peer through a gap between planks. What you see makes your breath catch. Snow, not the light dusting you've occasionally seen over the past few weeks, but real snow falling in thick, determined flakes that have already accumulated several inches on the ground. The abandoned cars along the street have become shapeless white mounds. The corpses of the infected that typically litter the intersection have been mercifully covered, transformed into innocent-looking lumps in an increasingly alien landscape. You've survived in Knox County for 153 days since the Knox event began in early July. You've learned to navigate streets choked with the shambling infected. You've mastered the art of silent movement, of breathing shallowly when zombies pass within arm's reach, of making yourself small and insignificant in the shadows. You've adapted to drinking rainwater after the municipal system failed. You've grown accustomed to canned food, to expired medicine, to the constant low-level fear that any moment could be your last. But winter is something else entirely. Winter in Kentucky isn't the brutal Arctic nightmare of northern climates, but it's persistent. Temperatures regularly drop below freezing. The infected don't seem bothered by cold at all. Their dead tissues apparently immune to hypothermia, while you must constantly manage your body temperature to avoid the slow descent into dangerous cold that can kill just as surely as any zombie bite. The snowfall intensifies as morning progresses. Standing at your window, you watch the transformation of the world outside. Muldra, already a ghost town of memories and decay, becomes something from a forgotten postcard. The snow softens every harsh edge, muffles every sound, creates an almost peaceful tableau that belies the horror lurking beneath this white blanket. Your safe house is a modest 2-story home on the outskirts of town that you fortified over the past months. Every window on the ground floor has been boarded shut. The back door is barricaded with a refrigerator you dragged across the kitchen floor, its weight reassuring against any undead attempting entry. Upstairs, you've created your living space, keeping one window with a removable board for emergency escape and visibility. The bedroom contains your sleeping bag, a pile of clothing scavenged from abandoned homes, several backpacks filled with supplies organized by category, and a small collection of books you've gathered for the endless empty hours. In the corner sits your most precious possession, an antique wood-burning stove you hauled here from a cabin in the woods 3 weeks ago. It took 2 exhausting days to transport it, dragging it behind you on a makeshift sled fashioned from a car hood and rope. But that effort has proven worthwhile countless times. The stove doesn't just cook food. It provides heat, that most basic and essential need, the difference between comfortable survival and shivering misery. Today, you're grateful for that stove more than ever. The temperature inside the house has already dropped noticeably. You can see your breath forming small clouds in the air. Your fingers are beginning to stiffen with cold despite the layers of clothing you wear. Long underwear beneath jeans, a t-shirt under a flannel shirt under a thick wool sweater, 2 pairs of socks inside your boots. Soon, you'll need to start burning wood to maintain a livable temperature. But first, you need to assess your situation. Survival in Project Zomboid's harsh world requires constant evaluation, constant planning, constant awareness of your resources, and their inevitable depletion. You mentally catalog what you have. Roughly 2 weeks of canned food, if you're careful. 10 bottles of clean water, plus the capability to collect and boil more. A bottle of multivitamins that's 3/4 full, basic medical supplies including bandages, disinfectant, and antibiotics scavenged from a pharmacy weeks ago. Enough firewood to last perhaps 5 days if you're conservative. That last item concerns you most. 5 days isn't long, and gathering more firewood in a snowstorm presents significant challenges. You'll need to venture outside, into the cold, into reduced visibility where zombies could approach unheard until they're dangerously close. You'll need to carry loads of wood back through snow that will slow your movement and increase fatigue. And all the while, you'll be burning precious calories that are increasingly difficult to replace. The wind begins to pick up around mid-morning. You can hear it moaning through the eaves of the house, rattling the boarded windows, finding every tiny gap in your fortifications, and whistling through them with increasing vigor. The snow is no longer falling straight down, but coming in at sharp angles, driven by gusts that occasionally shake the entire structure. This is developing into something more than a simple snowfall. This is becoming a genuine winter storm. You stoke the wood stove, watching the flames consume another piece of oak you'd split weeks ago in preparation for winter. The heat radiates outward in a comforting bubble, and you position yourself close, extending your hands toward the warmth. The temperature gauge you've attached to the stove reads 80 degrees Fahrenheit immediately adjacent to it, but you know that heat drops off rapidly with distance. 6 feet away, it might be 60 degrees. 10 feet away, closer to 50. The house has no insulation to speak of, and heat bleeds through the walls into the winter air outside. As the day progresses, the storm intensifies further. What began as heavy snowfall has evolved into a full blizzard. Visibility outside your window has shrunk to perhaps 20 feet. Beyond that, everything dissolves into a whirling white void. The wind shrieks now rather than moans, and you can feel the house trembling under its assault. Snow is accumulating at an alarming rate. Where there were inches this morning, there are now what appear to be several feet, building drifts against every vertical surface. You realize with growing concern that you're witnessing something significant. In all your months surviving the Knox event, you faced many challenges: hordes of zombies, near starvation, injuries, illness, the psychological toll of isolation. But you've never faced nature itself in this kind of fury. The infected don't discriminate between warm days and cold ones. They don't take shelter from storms. They simply continue their endless shambling existence, and now they're out there somewhere, invisible in the whiteout conditions, potential threats you can't see or hear approaching. The smart decision, clearly, is to stay inside, hunker down, conserve energy, wait out the storm. You have enough supplies to last several days without venturing out. The wood situation isn't critical yet. You can afford to wait, to let the storm pass before making any risky expeditions for additional resources. But Project Zomboid has taught you that waiting often comes with its own costs. Resources don't replenish themselves. Every day you consume food is a day closer to scarcity. Every piece of wood you burn is one less in your dwindling stockpile. The game's mechanics are unforgiving in their logic. Survive today, but always be planning for tomorrow, next week, next month. You spend the afternoon organizing your supplies, a task you've performed countless times, but one that provides both practical benefits and psychological comfort. There's something soothing about the routine of it, the tangible evidence of preparation and control in a world that offers precious little of either. You sort canned goods by expiration date, placing the oldest ones where you'll use them first. You count out your ammunition, 47 shells for the shotgun you carry on supply runs, arranged in neat rows on the bedroom floor. You fold and refold your spare clothing, creating organized stacks that maximize space in your limited storage. The wind continues its assault on the house. At one point, there's a tremendous crash from outside, and you rush to the window to investigate. Through the swirling snow, you can barely make out the shape of a large tree branch that has broken under the weight of accumulated ice and snow, falling into the street below. It's a reminder of the storm's power, of nature's indifference to your survival or demise. As afternoon fades toward evening, the temperature drops further. Even with the wood stove burning steadily, you can feel the cold creeping in around the edges of the room. Your breath is constantly visible now, small clouds dissipating into the frigid air. You add another layer of clothing, pulling on a padded jacket you'd been saving for the coldest days. The padding provides insulation rated for sub-zero temperatures, and you immediately feel its benefit. The game's interface would show your temperature status here, a simple indicator that can mean the difference between life and death in winter. In Project Zomboid, cold isn't just uncomfortable, it's actively dangerous. Extended exposure leads to hypothermia, which saps your health points gradually but relentlessly. If you let your core temperature drop too low for too long, you'll simply die. Another statistic in Knox County's apocalypse. You prepare an early dinner as darkness begins to fall. The storm has stolen several hours of daylight, the thick cloud cover and blowing snow creating premature twilight. You heat a can of soup on the wood stove, watching the metal slowly warm, steam eventually rising from the surface. The soup is vegetable, probably canned 18 months ago based on the faded date stamp, but it's still safe to eat and provides both calories and warmth. Sitting close to the stove, you eat slowly, savoring each spoonful. Food has become something different in this new world. No longer taken for granted, no longer consumed mindlessly while distracted by screens or conversations. Now, every meal is acknowledged, appreciated, understood as the fuel it is for continued survival. The soup tastes like salt and preserved vegetables and the metallic tang of the can, but it's warm and filling, and for this moment, that's everything. Night falls completely, and with it comes a new quality to the storm. The wind reaches a crescendo of sound, no longer mere howling, but something closer to a sustained scream. The house shakes continuously now, small tremors running through the walls and floor. You can hear debris striking the exterior, branches or loose objects torn free and hurled against the siding. The snow outside your window has completely obscured the glass, creating an insulating barrier that actually helps retain heat, but also completely cuts off your view of the world. You're blind now to what's happening beyond these walls. In normal circumstances, this would be merely uncomfortable. But in a world filled with zombies, blindness is potentially fatal. You have no way to know if the infected are gathering outside, drawn by some sound or movement you inadvertently made. You can't see if the storm is driving them to seek shelter, piling them up against buildings throughout town. You're isolated in every possible sense of the word, cut off not just from other survivors, which you haven't seen in months, but from basic awareness of your environment. This is when the psychological challenge of survival becomes most acute. Fear isn't rational in the apocalypse. It's a constant companion, sometimes loud, sometimes whisper quiet, but always present. Fear of zombies, obviously of the violent death they represent, but also fear of injury, of infection, of slowly starving or dying of thirst, fear of making a mistake, of missing some crucial detail that will cascade into disaster, fear of being truly, utterly alone, with no one to call for help, no safety net, no second chances. The wood stove becomes your anchor to sanity as the night deepens. You feed it another log, watching the flames dance and flicker, finding patterns in the burning wood that momentarily distract from the storm's fury. Heat radiates outward, and you arrange your sleeping bag as close as safety allows, creating a warm nest in the hostile cold. But sleep doesn't come easily. Every sound the house makes draws your attention. The wind's scream is a constant presence, but within it, you imagine other noises. Footsteps, groans, the scratch of decaying fingers against your barricades. Rationally, you know these are likely paranoid fabrications. Your mind conjuring threats from meaningless sounds. But in the darkness, with the storm raging and visibility zero, rationality is a thin comfort. You lie in your sleeping bag, fully clothed, including your jacket and boots, ready to move at a moment's notice, if necessary. Your shotgun rests beside you, loaded, safety off, within instant reach. In Project Zomboid, paranoia isn't a weakness, it's a survival mechanism. The players who relax too much, who assume they're safe, who let their guard down, those are the ones who die sudden, shocking deaths. Hours pass with agonizing slowness. You drift in and out of a light doze, never fully asleep, always partially aware of your surroundings. The wind continues its assault without pause, and at some point in the deep night, you hear a different sound, a groaning of wood that suggests structural stress. The house is old, built decades before the Knox event, and you suddenly worry about its ability to withstand this onslaught. What if the roof collapses under the weight of accumulated snow? What if a wall gives way to the wind's pressure? These aren't idle concerns. In the game's mechanics, structures can be damaged by various means. While a storm alone might not destroy a building, it contributes to decay, to weakening, to the gradual deterioration of everything in this world, where nothing is maintained or repaired at a societal level. You make a mental note to inspect the house thoroughly when the storm passes, to look for damage, to reinforce any weak points before they become critical failures. The stove needs feeding again. You reluctantly leave the warmth of your sleeping bag to add wood, and the temperature difference is shocking. Even 6 feet from the stove, the air is painfully cold, well below freezing. Your breath comes in thick clouds. Moving quickly, you add 2 logs to the fire, enough to last several hours, then retreat back to your sleeping bag. Time becomes meaningless in the darkness and storm. You might doze for minutes or hours. You might lie awake for similar periods. There's no way to tell. Your wind-up clock sits somewhere in the darkness, but you don't bother checking it. The numbers are irrelevant. All that matters is enduring until daylight, until the storm passes, until you can assess the new situation and adapt accordingly. Eventually, so gradually, you don't notice the transition. The quality of darkness begins to change. Not lighter exactly, but less absolute. The faintest suggestion of gray begins to creep into the black. Dawn is approaching, though you can't see the sun through the storm that continues unabated. You've survived the night. A small victory, but a genuine one. Rising stiffly from your sleeping bag, you feed the stove again and prepare for the day ahead. Your supplies of firewood have diminished noticeably. What you estimated as 5 days' worth yesterday is now perhaps 3.5 days. The mathematics of survival are simple and brutal. Resources deplete. They must be replenished. There is no alternative but looking at your window, still completely obscured by snow, listening to the wind that howls as fiercely as it did 12 hours ago, you know that venturing out remains impossible. This storm isn't weakening. If anything, it seems to have intensified during the night. The house shakes continuously, and the sound of wind is a physical presence, almost painful in its volume. You're trapped, truly trapped, in a way you haven't been since the Knox event began. Then, the military's blockades trapped people inside the exclusion zone. But there was still movement, still options, still the illusion of agency. Now, nature itself has become your prison guard, and all you can do is wait and hope that your preparations are sufficient.